weekly market breakdown for this week. I've already got the analysis drawn on, so it'll be a bit quicker than sort of the old style that we used to do. But yeah, I'll start from the weekly and then sort of go down to the M15, sort of what we can expect sort of from the higher time frames down. So obviously on the weekly in EU, we swept all this liquidity here behind these equal lows, and then since then we've been in this pullback. Now weekly for me is currently bullish. We had this pullback here and then we got close above. So weekly is bullish, so we could very easily mitigate some within this range and continue higher. You can see there's lots of unmitigated supply zones above, but obviously it's a weekly, so it's going to take ages for that to play out. However, if you take like this leg in price, which is sort of the most recent, just sort of, you can draw your weekly structure in numerous different ways. Like, you could even potentially view that as the weekly break structure, which would mean that would be the weekly swing high, and this then is just sort of the pullback following the break structure. But again, that's going to take ages to play out. The safest thing is just to focus on the most recent ranges. But we have mitigated the EQ of sort of, if you just take even this leg, which is the most recent sort of bearish leg, we have mitigated the EQ, so it's entirely possible that this is the pullback. We've mitigated the EQ, we've mitigated high probability supply, and we will now continue lower and potentially run this low. Obviously this high probability supply, it's a flip zone. You can see we reacted to the demand here, had the reaction failed, it swept liquidity, it had inducement, that candle failed to break the previous candles low, so there was inducement there, and it's also where the supply came into the market to take out this low, which was a pretty significant pullback. So yeah, entirely possible the pullback is complete and we may come lower and run this week low, but currently weekly is bullish, so we could just mitigate something in this range and continue higher. So that is how I'm viewing the weekly currently. On the daily then, daily for me is bullish. This was the most recent break structure, so this is our current strong swing low and this is our current weak swing high. We have mitigated this. It's a very high probability supply zone. You can see it swept liquidity, had the PBID built in front of it here. Yeah, high probability supply zone, so no surprise that we're seeing a decent reaction from it. As I said, the daily's bullish, so once we got this bearish chalk, which is here, it was highly likely that was the start of the pullback. Obviously we swept liquidity there into the high probability daily supply, so again, no surprise that has been the catalyst for the pullback. Bearish daily chalk, and then you can see we have supply being respected here. So entirely possible we mitigate the supply and continue lower. We have mitigated the EQ, so it is possible that the bearish pullback is complete and the price will continue higher and run the weak swing high. However, if you look at these demand zones, they're all mitigated, so personally I view that as liquidity that is likely to sort of fuel the move lower. And then if you look at the extreme in terms of the demand, we have that pretty clear POI at the extreme. If you just take you can take the sell by Wix, the engulfed candle, just to cover the whole sort of, just to cover all bases. And yeah, I'd say it's very likely that we're going to at least come down here. So coming in the next week, may pull back in this supply before continuing lower this demand. And then, obviously we know the daily's bullish, we know we've mitigated demand at the extreme, so if you start to see signs of bullish intent on, the daily, like a bullish chalk, bullish IBOS, or, the 4-hour, then sort of buys a pretty good value, understanding the daily intentions. So yeah, that's where we're sitting on the daily currently. On the 4-hour then, so 4-hour for me is bearish. This is the most recent 4-hour break structure. I have just counted these as internal break structure. You could, if you want to simplify things, just view them as swing structure, but relative to sort of the swings over here, they're not as significant, so I was happy enough just to view them as internal. Because swinging internal is bearish, we're anticipating that these demand zones are just going to be reaction points, and as you can see, this one, and this one, they all just price pushed into it, pull back into supply, and continue lower. Mitigated demand, pull back into the previous range, continue lower, and then on Friday we had obviously mitigated this one, and that was sufficient for a pullback into the range. So swinging internal, both bearish. A lot of bearish momentum at this point. Could of course see a pullback to the premium of the leg, which obviously the EQ is there, but for me to have confidence that that's going to happen, I would want to see this high go to minimum. So if we got a bullish high bust, then we can start looking to follow the internal demand ranges to potentially target the premium. But again, as things stand, swinging internal bearish, we've mitigated the most recent supply range, a lot of bearish momentum. So coming into Monday, the most likely scenario is that we mitigate maybe this supply at the extreme and then continue lower. And of course, if we get the bullish high bust, then we can sort of flip our bias and look for buys. Yeah, so that's the 4 hour. Very clean price action the last couple of weeks. You know, we had tricky price action up here where sort of price was range bound on the M15. You know, we had mixed signals. Internal was bearish, swing was bullish. So you have mixed signals in the 4 hour. The daily was sort of indecisive. Whereas once we sort of broke out of this range, you can see we've had very clean price action with, you know, clear lower lows and lower highs, and supply being respected to hold it down, with demand just providing reaction points, which very clean, you know, price action and sort of scenarios where you want to be aggressive. And then just take a quick look at the M15. So I have my M15 as bullish, understanding that the M15 likely switch bullish just to facilitate the mitigation of the 4 hour range, which was obviously the 4 hour internal pullback that I highlighted in the 4 hour. So again, you know, there's some people that get confused, you know, why can't you map this as internal? Why do you map it to swing? Why doesn't it matter? It's like, ultimately, you just have to be aware of, it doesn't matter how you map it, you just have to be aware of what the next level of structure, you know, what the likely intentions are with that. And, you know, if you map this as internal, M15 internal structure, then you're the sort of the next level of structure that you're worried about is M15 swing. So you understand that you're likely just playing the M15 pullback into the premium and swing range for continuing lower. Equally, I viewed this as M15 swing structure, so the next layer of structure above that for me is the 4 hour internal in this case. So I understand that the M15 trend is likely just to fulfill the objection of the 4 hour internal, which was the pullback in display. So yeah, that's sort of why, I hope that sort of summarizes why, like, you know, it doesn't really matter whether you map it as swing or internal on the M15. You just have to sort of understand what the next level of structure is, whether that's M15 swing if you map it as internal, or 4 hour internal if you map it as M15 swing. Again, that's where multi-time frame analysis comes in. You understand the intentions of all the time frames and how they sort of interact with each other, and ultimately it doesn't matter how you do it, just do what makes the most sense for you. You know, if you prefer mostly focusing on the M15 and sort of putting the 4 hour in the back burner, then you probably will be better off viewing this internal. But as I said, I was happy enough just to I was aware that it was the 4 hour internal pullback, so I was happy to view it as M15 swing. See here, we swept liquidity on Friday. We'd mitigated this range, which is obviously the 4 hour internal range as aware of, and then you can see decent amount of bearish momentum, but it turned out to be a fake out and price just rocketed to the upside. You can see this range here, the EQ of it wasn't mitigated, which was pretty much what we pulled back to mitigate here. This was just a fake IBOS to mitigate the EQ of this range, and then price shot to the upside. Now, M15 swing is bullish for me, so it's entirely possible we mitigate within this range and continue higher, perhaps to mitigate the 4 hour pivot up here. Internal has switched bearish, so you could potentially be looking at sells from here. However, again, if you're playing the M15 internal, you have to understand what the M15 swing is doing. And, you know, at this point, it's possible you only switch bearish to mitigate the EQ of the swing range before continuing higher. So it's more aggressively selling at this point, as we haven't mitigated the discount of the EQ range, the discount of the M15 swing range. So again, it's just understanding how the various layers of structure interact with each other. So it's entirely possible that now we may just push higher. But again, it depends how aggressive you want to be. You might be happy to say, you know, 4 hour internals bearish, so you're happy to look for a sell from there. But again, a lot can change sort of coming into the market on Monday with the M15. You know, we could have completely different ranges to work with following the Asia session on Sunday night, Monday morning. So obviously we'll post our updated markups in the markups channel pre-session. I'll cover AU as well. The weekly actually brings a bit of clarity. I haven't really been looking at the weekly in AU for the last while. I haven't really been trading it, to be honest, so I just sort of lost perspective of the weekly. As I've been highlighting in all sort of session recaps, we're stuck in this sort of messy sideways range for the last few weeks. However, on the daily, you can see we have swept this high and mitigated this flip zone. You could even just take the wick there if you want, but you can see we reacted to these wicks, reaction field, and then we got a bearish IBOS. So on the weekly, swing is bearish, that's a swing leg. We've had the pullback, swept the swing high, and then a bearish IBOS. So obviously with equal highs there as well, so, or equal lows, sorry. So it's very likely the price is going to continue lower and run this low eventually, and in sort of the nearer term, run these equal lows. Again, with this flip zone here, that is likely going to be good for a weekly pullback, perhaps before continuing lower. So yeah, the sweep liquidity in this daily flip zone is a pretty key detail. I would say, having seen this over the next couple of weeks, it's probable that we'll run these equal lows at a minimum. On the daily, swinging and turn is bearish. This is the swing range. We had the pullback, swept liquidity, and then we pushed down and had a bearish IBOS. So swing and internal are both bearish. So obviously expecting this low to go eventually, with supply being respected for the most part. Equal lows to target. Swept liquidity here, didn't mitigate the daily supply as I had drawn it here, but obviously having looked at the weekly, we have mitigated the weekly flip wicks. So that sweep liquidity had a bearish chalk. So yeah, very possible that supply could be respected at this point and we run these equal lows. So have this supply here, which is sort of completely unmitigated, so we could come up here for potentially coming lower, or we could just pull back into the supply and continue lower from there. So that's the main idea with the daily. 4 hour then. So on the 4 hour, we had a bullish break structure with the close above there, but then of course we're aware, again using multi-time frame analysis, understanding how sort of the time frames interact with each other, we know that the next time frame above the 4 hour that we use is the daily. So while we had the close above in the 4 hour, it's a sweep liquidity on the daily. So on the 4 hour there's a strong low, however on the daily it is weak, and we know that we have pretty clear equals there. So while the 4 hour is still technically bullish, it's entirely possible that this low will go and we'll come lower. You can see internal is bearish, we have an IBOS there and an IBOS there. We swept sort of pretty minor liquidity here, and had a pullback, and then swept the high here. So you can see we had a similar sort of price action here where we swept the high, and then you could have interpreted it as a bullish shock, but then price did continue lower and give us another IBOS. So it's very possible that having swept this high, the price will run this low at a minimum. Obviously this is the last point in the sand for the 4 hour bullish trend to sustain. However, given how the daily's looking on the sweep liquidity up here, I'd say the most likely scenario is that this will just be a minor reaction for a pullback into supply, and then hopefully we'll get the sell off to smash the equal lows on the daily. So yeah, coming into next week, massively favour sells. Could see some buys from this demand, but then obviously ultimately understanding the daily and weekly intentions, we know there's a decent chance that the 4 hour bullish trend is going to fail and we'll switch bearish. M15 then. So had this sweep liquidity here again. We always know that when we're going to get a trend change, it's usually precipitated with a pretty clear sweep liquidity, which we've had there. I think that was during Powell's speech yesterday. We swept the high, huge wick, bit of reaction to demand, and then reaction failed. We've had a bearish M15 break structure. So yeah, M15 bearish. The obvious supply within the range is there. Again, no inducement, didn't sweep. So wait for a strong liquidation on the M1 and the M5 if you're trading it. Again, had that zone there, the price is mitigated, so it's entirely possible. Again, not the best POI, but you can see it's where the supply came into the market that caused price to close below the swing low, so it caused the bearish break structure, so it's entirely possible we just mitigate that and continue lower. But again, not beyond the realms possibility that we come up here and then sell off. We have mitigated this zone here, so no surprise that we've seen sort of the large wick, albeit it was at session close on Friday. You can see very clear range, swept liquidity, a lot of demand come into the market to cause price to shoot to the upside like that, so very likely that'll be a catalyst for at least a pullback. whether it's just a pullback, well, I haven't said that now. We pulled back in this play, pushed down, mitigated this here, sweep, large wick. I'd say at this point it's likely potentially coming up here before we see the next leg to the downside. But again, a lot can change, particularly AU's slightly more active in the Asia session given the time zone. So things could completely change coming into London on Monday. But as always, I'll post my AU analysis in the analysis channels beforehand. So that's EU and AU broken down from the weekly, what we can sort of expect. Yeah, if you're trading the if you're trading the M1, the M15, the weekly, the daily, especially the weekly, can be slightly overkill, but it is always good to be aware of where price is sitting on them. On AU, the weekly gives you quite a clear sort of perspective that the messy range, maybe about to end as we swap liquidity into the sort of flip zone. So yeah, hopefully over on AU over the next couple of weeks we'll see some nice sells to target that daily and weekly liquidity at the equal lows. But hopefully it's took some value from that. If you have any questions on about analysis, just give me a shout in one of the in the questions channel, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks very much, guys. Goodbye.